Pinelands Regional School District and the Little Egg Harbor School District. I'm going to ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is to advise those present at this meeting of the Board of Education of the Pinelands Regional School District and the Little Egg Harbor School District in the County of Ocean that adequate notice of this meeting was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. The notice has been posted on the Board of Education offices and school buildings. The notice was also mailed to the Press of Atlantic City and filed with the municipal clerks of Bass River Township, Eagleswood Township, Little Egg Harbor Township, and the Borough of Tuckerton. We're going to do roll call for Pinelands first. Mrs. McVeigh. Mr. Dalio.
Here.
Mr. Rossetti.
Here.
Mr. Williams. Ms. Chambers. Ms. Poklakua.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Ms. Palladino. Ms. Hannadel.
Yes, here.
And Mr. Bartlett.
Here.
Okay, now we're going to do a quick roll call for the Little Egg Harbor Board of Education. Dr. Snyder. Mr. Keeb. Ms. Palin. Ms. Roth. Mr. Zimmerman. Ms. Januzzi. Ms. Semler. I think I see Ms. Roth right there.
Nick, do we have anyone from Little Egg?
No, we advertise it as a public meeting in case we had quorums of both boards. So continue to follow the agenda. I do see that Ms. Roth joined us. Ms. Roth, do you mind confirming you're here verbally?
Verbally, I'm here.
And Nick, we have Jacqueline Finnegan is here from Little Egg, and not as a board member, but as a rep. And then Dr. Snyder may be joining us. She just might be running late.
Okay, great. We'll continue to follow the the agenda and the open public meeting protocol just to make sure that we're following the rules there. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the April 21st agenda as presented from Pinelands, please?
Motion.
Second.
All right. Are there any questions? And since I do not have a quorum of the Little Egg Board, I'm not going to motion for approval of this agenda right now. Okay. For Pinelands,
Just on the link, the original link did not work that was sent. So that's how I just finally got in. So I don't know if anyone else is here from Little Egg.
I resent the link out to Little Egg a little bit ago, but I got you as attended, Dr. Snyder. Thank you. All right. So Pinelands Board, all in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Yes, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? That motion carries. Okay, so the purpose of tonight's meeting, if you'll just let me share my screen so I can get to my notes here. The purpose of today's meeting is to give the public and the boards of education a brief update on the K-12 regionalization study. And what we're going to look at is how we came to participate in this study, the scope of the work that's being performed, and a timeline for this project to be complete. Just as a housekeeping item, we received a number of questions ahead of the meeting from the public, most of them concerning staffing and taxes. And just understand that this presentation will address what is being studied, and that work is just beginning. So there are a lot of questions from the public. They're great questions, but at this point, the study is not at the point of answering those questions yet. And we'll dive into that a little bit as we go through. It's important to note for everybody that this study is a very preliminary step in the process. It's for fact-finding only, and it doesn't guarantee that consolidation is right for any or all of the districts within the Pinelands Regional School District. The point of this is to conduct this study to find out if it's feasible or possible to make a regional K-12 district. We'll provide regular updates at our monthly board meetings going forward, but tonight we wanted to just introduce the project a little more formally and explain some of the details that I outlined above. The first question is, how did we get into the study? So you may remember that the New Jersey state government created something called the Path to Progress. And that Path to Progress, which you can visit the website, oh boy, no, I clicked out of it, is chaired by Senators Sarlo and Arrojo and Assemblyman Lewis Greenwald, and it includes Senator Sweeney, Senator Adiego, Senator Bucco, and Senator Singleton. So it's got broad legislative support. It includes dozens of policy recommendations aimed at cutting costs for states and local governments that are borne by taxpayers. Our focus is on educational reform, as that's the part of the project, the Path to Progress, that intersects with school districts. So in 2019, Governor Murphy and the Department of Community Affairs created a grant program called the Local Efficiency Achievement Program, or LEAP. And it established grant funds for local schools and municipalities to study regionalization and shared services. So we formed a regionalization committee that's comprised of board members and administrators from all the schools, and also with some of our labor leaders. We met as a group back in December of 2019 and January of 2020, and we agreed that we would apply for the grant to conduct the study. So in this grant application, Pinelands functions as the lead agency on the project, and Tuckerton, Little Egg Harbor, Eagleswood, and Bass River are participating agencies in the project. We submitted an application in January 2020 requesting $90,000 in LEAP grant funds to conduct this study. In July of 2020, that application was approved. So the important thing to know, the cost of this study is not being borne by the boards of education. This is covered through the LEAP grant. So this is, I think the next point here is really where people focus, where all of the questions came in. And you'll see, we'll take the questions and go through them in the public comment portion, but there are 17 areas that are required to be studied as part of the LEAP grant. And obviously enrollment, facility utilization, contiguous districts with small enrollment, any existing send-receive relationships, administrative staffing, class size, diversity enhancement, debt obligations, contractual obligations like collective bargaining agreements and other obligations, the impact on state aid, the impact on tax revenue, potential cost savings that would be achieved through through consolidation or regionalization, the impact on transportation, faculty needs and attrition, curriculum coordination, diversity evaluation, and program enrichment. So these, when you apply for the grant, these are the 17 areas that are required to be studied as part of our grant process. So Pinelands and the steering committee ran an RFP in October of 2020 to identify the firm that was best qualified to study the things that those 17 items above. So we included 3 important additional pieces that I think the public should be aware. The first is that any plan that regionalize these districts has to protect union jobs. We all understand how important our good paying union jobs are to the economic health of Southern Ocean County and also to New Jersey as a whole. We also said that we want all school buildings that are currently operating to remain in operation as on the other side of this. We don't want to close any schools as part of this regionalization. And then we also wanted to study combinations of potential outcomes. For example, if Eagleswood and Tuckerton were to join the K-12 regional or remain independent after the study is complete. So the committee ran this RFP and we unanimously selected a firm called Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman. And they're a well-known firm for conducting these types of studies around the state. So what does Porzio do? What's the process? It starts with them sending to each of the districts a request for information. And they need details on our long-range facilities plans, our curriculum, our collective bargaining agreements, everything you can think about on the operation of the school district. They want that information from each of the participating districts. So in February of 21, we had, in Feb 21, sorry, I'm letting people in here. We provided the information to Porzio to conduct the study, and it got started. So when we talk about we won't have answers to all of your questions tonight, it's because the process really is just getting rolling with the actual study itself. So we study the components that we outlined above and that were included in the RFP. And Porzio is also going to meet with the committee and stakeholders to answer questions about the study as it progresses. And at the end of it, they're going to provide a comprehensive statistical analysis of the data and make recommendations based on that analysis. So that's the scope that Porzio is going to perform. The timeline that they're going to complete it in it's likely to be completed by the end of July. So for us, we want to make sure we begin and continue with stakeholder engagement from now until the end of the study. Now that the work is being done and there's actually information to report back out, we want to make sure that we're going to have regular updates on this project at our respective board meetings. And it's important for everybody to understand that if Porzio's recommendation is to regionalize, then the individual boards then must agree to move forward, and then a special election would be held. So that special election has to be conducted in September under current statute. So in this timeline, September 2022 is the earliest possible date for a special election, and September 2024 being the earliest possible date that any regionalization could be implemented. I don't want to comment on the likelihood that it happens during that. That's the purpose of the study. But if you're looking at the earliest possible timelines that these things can happen, that's the earliest. It cannot happen before that. Another important thing to remember is that all the towns have a say. Every constituent district in Pinelands, every registered voter in these districts has a vote at the end of the process to determine the outcome. Nobody can be forced into regionalization or consolidation without the majority of voters in those municipalities approving that. So we want you to know that we're committed to providing all of our stakeholders, our community, our elected officials, our education association and support staff with timely, accurate, and truthful information as we move forward. Tonight's meeting is only the first step of many steps to get this process completed. And we'll also, like I mentioned, be updating regularly at board meetings going forward. So that's the update from 10,000 feet on the project, the scope, and the timeline. What I want to do next is we offer the public an opportunity to throw some questions in advance. So I'm going to move next to, before I do that, for the members of the board who are on us, do you have any questions based on the information that we presented so far?
No, thank you for that overview.
Yep. So then we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, which is residents forum, general topics. Board policy 0167 encourages community participation in every meeting. However, the board requests that the public respect a reasonable time limit when commenting on agenda items. So what we'll do first is look at the questions that were submitted in advance, and then we'll open it up to any questions that the public may have. So hang on one sec, I'm going to pull up those questions. And some of these are a little long-winded, so I'll try to summarize them a little succinctly. So the first one is, what are the benefits of consolidation? Does this mean reconfiguring the grades in schools again, or including more neighborhood schools? Or is this looking to eliminate or combine schools or making them larger overall? As I pointed out earlier, one of our requirements in the RFP is that we continue to utilize all the school buildings that are currently in operation. So the other questions here, the benefits from this, that's what we're studying. We will need to see if there's a financial benefit, what is it? If there's a positive impact for our students, that's the most important thing. What does that look like? So a little early to answer that, but that's certainly something that'll be touched on in the study. Will schools be closed? And if so, how will class sizes be affected? Again, like the first question, we wish to study this as no schools get closed, and the impact of class size will be studied, and that's something we'll discuss at a future meeting. This commenter also comments that the roof at GJM needs to be redone. Agree, that's something in our long-range facility plan, and we're planning with facilities. The next question is how many more schools would be combined? Again, we're not trying to combine the schools, and facility use is part of the study that we've talked about. How will this impact each of the constituent districts and their tax rates and structure? Obviously, this one is the most common questions we had before the meeting were about the impact on taxes. And it's too early to answer that. That's the purpose of the study, is to better understand the impact on our taxes and on state aid, on all the revenues and expenses of the district. Will we see a decrease in taxes is another one. So same answer as above. How will this impact administrative costs and personnel? Again, that's something that gets studied throughout this process. Another question similarly, how did this impact staffing and associated costs? How would this affect the percentage of property taxes we currently pay? And what would be the maximum students per class? We don't know the tax impact yet. We do not know the impact on the class size yet. But I think it's important to know that if the study comes back and says that your taxes are going up and your class sizes are bigger, I think it's fair to say the boards are not going to consider moving forward with it at that point. So I think it's the importance of having a comprehensive study conducted is so that we understand these questions much more in depth than we do today. A question about whether or not this will affect start and end times. That's a good question. I'll have to run that past Porzio and see if we're going to look at that at all. But that's an interesting one that we haven't seen yet. The next commenter, I don't see a question here. This one appears to just be a statement generally not supporting any regionalization or consolidation. The next person here asked 4 questions. Will I be expected to pay other districts' debts and bonds? That's a great question. You know, Pinelands, Little Egg Harbor, Eagleswood, and Tuckerton all have bond debt on their books to varying degrees. So how that gets split up and taken care of is obviously a very important part of the study. Would positions be combined or eliminated? We talked about the importance of protecting union jobs. We've also talked with Senator Sweeney's office and as part of the legislation that's being introduced now to look for additional funding to support a transition from our current setup to a regionalized setup so that there was, if we needed to have extra staff during that time, that we had some state funding to support that so that positions didn't need to be eliminated. Will this save money and how much? That's one of the 2 golden questions, and that's something we'll be drilled down on as we get closer to July. How will a new board be formed, and how will the superintendent be chosen? Well, the new board, that's something that they're going to study in it, but that's something I'll get more information on for the next update. I haven't discussed much how a new board is formed. If any consolidation were to take place, how would it impact the individual schools? We just talked about how, and this is a state that I think this is a really common sentiment, a parent from Eagleswood who really likes the small feel of the school and doesn't want to be combined into a bigger district. Absolutely. And that's why we structured the RFP to consider options with schools like Eagleswood and Tuckerton, either in or out based on what they want to do. A similar question on the next one, how does this impact combining schools? But this question impacts or touches on transportation. Currently, I'm concerned regionalizing would increase transportation complications. So we currently, I don't visualize much impact on transportation because we currently work together with all 5 districts to transport, and we would still do the same in any changed environment. So it is studied, but I foresee very little impact on transportation.
So Nick, that was also my thought, if I could interject. On
Yeah, absolutely.
the start time, the question regarding the start and stop time.
Mhm.
I think that's part of the transportation considerations, and really we've consideration already.
I'm sorry, did somebody else have a question there too?
I actually do.
Yeah, go ahead.
My one question is, are all positions within the district then considered union positions? Or are there administrative positions that are not considered protected by the union? Is my first
There-
question.
Yes, there are positions that are not union positions. There are admin positions that are not unionized. There are non-affiliated and non-aligned positions that are currently not unionized. The support staff and the certificated teaching staff are union positions.
So about what
And-
percentage of this would we be talking about that are not going to be protected if this regionalization would take place? 10%, 20%?
No, I think you're, and I'm just trying to think of that off the top of my head. And in Pinelands, I think we're about 220 of the 280. These are rough numbers of the staff
Okay.
members are in the union. In Little Egg Harbor, I don't have those numbers as handy, but I
Okay.
think we're probably very similar in those splits.
But Nick, to
Okay.
stay protected, I mean, one of the things that we were talking about with this study is we control the outcome of it. So if we're going to say, like, we want to make sure that every position is covered and they're going to be eliminated through attrition, we have the ability to say that in the end result.
Okay. And that kind of goes along with my next question, like how long will this protect? You know, you said the goal is to keep all schools open if you regionalize. Like how long would that protection last? Or like in 2 years, if you say this is not working this way, it's better if we have all of K-2 in one building from all the districts. Like, is there a certain time frame, or is this going to be throughout the, I don't know if there is a contract, or is it
That's a good question, Dr. Snyder, and I'll have to get some more information. I'll follow up with Porzio on it. My thought on that would be a decision that is arrived at by the then Board of Education. If, in this scenario, you're assuming that a regionalization happens and then there's a new Board of Education of that regional district, and it would be that group that decides facility use after the original formation of the district. But I think it's important to note that in 18A, the statute that governs a lot of school operations, there are protections for any tenured teaching staff as part of 18A. We had experience with that with the Bass River staff. So anytime a school district ceases operation and the majority of their students then go to another district, the teachers are entitled to their, and all tenured teaching staff are entitled to their positions and all of the other emoluments like their sick banks and those things in the newly formed district. But I think that's something that I think that's probably one of the more complex parts of the study, right? You're talking about having 220 represented people at Pinelands, 200 represented people at Little Egg Harbor, another 25 in the other districts, and they're all under different collective bargaining agreements. And the idea would be, how do you mesh all that together? And I think that's one of the more difficult things to study as part of this, but certainly something that's included in the scope of work from Porzio.
But I think what Dr. Snyder, what you're alluding to is that, you don't want this board or all of these current boards to agree to something. And then 2 years from now, another board say, well, now all of the students from Eagleswood have to go to Little Egg School because we want kindergarten and first grade in this building. And then that's a disruption to them. So what we've been told since the onset of this is that there's no cookie cutter way to do this. So if we wanted to say, yes, each board agrees to it, however, we want these terms and agreements, that for the next 10 years, X, Y, and Z occurs, that all of the schools remain intact with the current grade levels and there's no change in, configuration. So that's what the direction that we've been given, is that we have the ability to create those parameters.
Okay, but then also the question is too, what voices the unions have, because now we also have, each school has a different union, and I'm assuming each of their, subgroups have different unions.
Right,
What voice do they have in this ultimate decision of regionalizing? Because,
Well,
right, they would all have to come to terms to a new contract, right?
Well, they ultimately, yes, and that's one of the things we're going to get from this study. And obviously, you see Miss Neal on here, and Jacqueline's on here, and they are a representation of the union. We don't know what the recommendation would be in terms of contracts, but they're a big part of the voting constituents. So the voters would have to actually come out and vote yes to this too. So they do play a role in that. We want them to have buy-in. So we don't want to make this difficult for them. I know that we did have a superintendent roundtable meeting recently, and I believe it was Freehold and Freehold Borough. And whatever the smaller district was, they tried to do a study such as this, and the smaller district said that when they did the analysis on the contracts, it would cost too much money for them to actually enter into the other contract, and it wasn't worth it to the school districts. That's some of the information and data that we're going to get from this.
Freehold Borough, that's the one.
Kim, is that what it was? Yeah.
Smaller.
Smaller one was, it would cost the taxpayers too much money for them to enter into the larger agreement, so it wasn't worth it. But, you know, as Nick said, there's no secrets here. That's why they're on these meetings, and we're just going to get data at this point, and then we're going to see if it's really worth it in the short term and long term to everyone involved in this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you touched on there, Dr. McCooley, is a great point that somewhere around, it's been a little bit since I looked at this, but I want to say it was in the high 40% of Little Egg Harbor teaching staff lives in Little Egg Harbor or in 08087. So you have a number of our staff members, certainly more so on our support staff members, live in our community, and hopefully they're registered voters and have their voices heard at the ballot box too, because this is something that ultimately the community decides on, and that community includes all of the employees that live within the boundaries of the community. So I think they do have a voice, and I think we understand how important it is that their voice is heard from the beginning of this, because this would be an impossible undertaking if they don't want to go along, right? That's the point of having an open discussion about it, making sure that we're addressing everybody's concerns.
I think it's Kim again. I think it was 178 when we did the referendum that lived in those two districts, Tuckerton and Little Egg.
Yeah. Did anybody else have any questions about the information that we covered today?
I don't have anything at this time. Thanks.
No problem. And remember, guys, we're going to give at all of our regular meetings going forward, we'll give updates on the project, and when appropriate, we'll have when there's something substantial for Porzio to present, they'll present something based on the study that's being conducted. So I want to thank everybody for jumping on and contributing to the conversation. Remember that I said in the beginning, this is a first step in a long process. We want this to be inclusive. If you have questions, comments, you can email them to me, and I'm happy to either get answers or give you answers if I have them. I want to make sure that we allow time from the public to contribute here. Phil, do we have anybody online or through chat contributing questions in addition to what we covered already?
No, sir, I don't have anyone.
Okay. So Pinelands board members, anything for board forum?
So Nick, I'll just say thanks for coordinating this and starting to expand the discussion a bit and open it up to the public. I would just ask, I think you said that we're due the regional study back from Porzio in late July, right? If we could have that meeting, you know, after, if you could share the report so we could review it and digest it in advance of the board meeting. So
Absolutely.
Porzio is here planning it, right? Let's let them answer the questions, and let's let them hear from the residents as well. I think
Are we
would be
gonna have a
idea, Karen.
Yeah, along those lines of what Karen asked, are we gonna have a special meeting with Porzio just to go over the details of this in like a public forum that they can ask questions and stuff?
I think that's appropriate, right? It's probably hard to crowbar this into the work session of a regular public meeting. And it'll probably be multiple, because we might need to do this with, separately with the different boards of education too. So
I think
yes is the short answer, but I don't have the details of when that meeting would be. But we did talk to Porzio about them giving a public presentation based on the data and the recommendations that they're going to make based on that analysis. So I would imagine we're talking about them being done the report in July, not that it's presented to the public in July. So we're at August is the time where we're all here, we're digesting the report from Porzio.
good. Thank you.
My pleasure. So the last item on tonight's agenda is a motion for adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting from a Pinelands board member?
Motion.
Second.
Was that Kim? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. And for Little Egg, we don't have a quorum of the board, so we don't need to motion out. But For the Pinelands Board, all in favor of adjourning the meeting at 6:33 PM, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? All right, so we are completed with tonight's work session at 6:33. And again, guys, first step in a long process, ask all the questions you want. We'll make sure if we don't have the answers, we get them to Porzio and we continue this discussion with the public and the boards of education because it's a very important discussion to have. Reminder to everybody, the next meeting for the Pinelands Board of Education is April 27th. For the Little Egg Harbor Board of Education is Wednesday, April 28th. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.
Night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.